I got out of the shower one day and I just caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And I was like, I haven't seen myself naked in a really long time. I would just get dressed really quick and go to work or do what, go take care of something for a kid or whatever. And I was like, it's like looking at a stranger almost.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their funny, sexy, and fascinating stories as they take us on their journey. We always strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy and positive approach to non-monogamy.
However, everyone approaches it a little differently. And at its core, our show is about hearing, highlighting, and learning from the different experiences and approaches people have. With that in mind, it is important to remember that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of our own.
So sit back, relax, and just accept the fact that your time with us will be spent in an awkward turmoil of laughter and arousal. We should also let you know that this podcast will hopefully include some explicit language.
If that kind of thing offends you, we suggest you keep listening until it no longer does. If you're under 18, you either need to stop listening or go get your parents and you can listen as a family. The choice is yours. Enjoy!
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 16. This is an episode where we interview some fellow podcasters, spiritual swingers.
Yeah, Adam and Eve came on the show a few months back, and we just haven't had a chance to get their episode out, so we apologize to them for taking a little while. If you haven't heard of them, the best way to get in touch with them, I think, is probably on Twitter at Spiritual Swing, or at their website, spiritualswingers.net.
Yes, exactly.
And while you're out there searching the web, if you want to find the show notes for this show or anything else, you can go to our website,
which is normalizingnonmonogamy.com. You can also find us on Twitter under the screen name NNM Podcast.
And while you're there, if you get bored and you want to sign up for Cassidy and get a free 30-day elite membership, go ahead and use the links on the resource page to do that. And without much further ado, I think we should just jump into the interview.
Yeah, we had one thing to mention, though.
We did. At about the 55, 56 minute mark, somewhere in there, they're talking about how people have noticed a difference in his personality since they started doing this. And
since they started swinging.
Now they know. You ruined the surprise.
It's in the name.
Anyway, the audio cuts out for a split second, and there was no real good way to salvage it, so we just kind of left it. But you get the pretty good gist of it. We just wanted to acknowledge that and make you guys aware. Let's jump into the show. Now we can do that. We're going?
Yeah, let's go.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We have Adam and Eve from the Spiritual Swingers podcast with us.
Hey, this is Adam.
And this is Eve.
We're the Spiritual Swingers. We started with the podcast around January, was it? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, after we went to Desire last November, and we were telling our story to some of the other podcasters, specifically Mr. and Mrs. Jones and C&D from Swinging Down Under. And it was kind of funny, actually. We told it to C&D over dinner, and they're like, oh, we totally need to interview you guys and hear your story because it's so... It could be beneficial to people. And we're like, oh, okay, sure. Well, if we work something out, we'll figure it out. And then the funniest one was the Joneses. We were telling them the story in the hot tub at Desire one night, and Eve was like totally rolling her eyes at me the whole time, saying, you need to stop being so detailed with this story, because I had told it like 25 times by that point. And I started out telling the story, and Mr. Jones was sitting next to Eve, who was sitting next to Mrs. Jones in the hot tub. And Mr. Jones, being Mr. Jones, had his arm around Eve, of course, his arm around a beautiful woman. How would he not? And as I'm telling the story, about midway through it, he works his way up to where he's now standing beside me, just completely enthralled in this story. And I'm like, if any story is good enough to get Mr. Jones from having his arm around a beautiful woman to standing next to a naked dude while he tells a story, it's got to be a good story.
So you cock-blocked him with your story.
Yeah, I totally did. But it was voluntary, I guess. And then we both apologized to each other the next morning about being awkward about how we were interacting with each other. So it was kind of funny.
Well, we're definitely going to dive into the story here in a minute. But for anybody who's not familiar with you guys, do you mind sharing just a little bit of personal background? Obviously not super detailed, but, roughly your ages and, maybe a couple of things that you guys do outside of going to Desire and doing swinging events.
Well, we are in our early 40s, and I like to run. I mean, we're just like a normal family. We have a couple of kids that are elementary school aged, and we're kind of involved in all of that. I do work outside the home. We both do. And, most of our day-to-day life is probably just like anybody else's.
So this isn't something you guys do like 6 days a week and you just take one day off to recharge the batteries or anything?
Not to that level yet. Yeah, not quite.
As much as everybody calls it the lifestyle, it is not a lifestyle. It's like a side job at the most. Yeah, for sure. Well, and we credit whatever happens in the lifestyle to Adam's marketing efforts, because he's quite the I had a
PR person for the couple. You're always you're the quickest one to chat. Like if somebody contacts us, you're the first one.
I'm the gatekeeper
that starts and pretty much continues.
Yeah,
I mean, I pop into chats and things when I can, but it's not very
We've
often.
been in the lifestyle a little over a year, and last summer kind of was our marketing campaign, so to speak.
Like trying to put yourself out there on dating websites and stuff?
Yeah, I had a lot of time last summer to be able to almost make our lifestyle re-entry, so to speak, kind of a full-time job. I took kind of a carpet bombing strategy with it because I quickly discovered that the lifestyle is a lot like a junior high dance, especially on the sites. Everybody's just kind of standing around on the perimeter waiting on someone to talk to them.
Right.
So if you're just that person that reaches out to someone first or takes time to send a decent message, you're good to go. So I kind of joked that it was a carpet bombing strategy, but I sent out hundreds of emails to people. Just if I was remotely interested in your profile, I sent a message.
Right.
Because my strategy basically was not to put all my eggs into one basket. Because if I send out one or two messages and I don't get any replies, we're going to get down on ourselves really quickly. You're going to start wondering, what's wrong with my pictures? What's wrong with my profile? What's wrong with us that nobody's messaging us back? So if you send out like 50 messages at once and you get one or two replies from those, all of a sudden you feel successful. Like, hey, people are interested in it. So, that was kind of a general strategy with it.
Did you guys craft like an individual message for each person? Did you look at their profile and say, here's a couple of key things that I should mention when I send this? Or do you just copy, paste, hit send and hope for the best?
Honestly, mostly it was kind of a copy and paste thing. There was a handful of profiles here and there where the written profile struck me more so than some of the others did. So in ones like that, I would take the time to address specific points in the profile. But most of the others, I mean, as much as we like to say that the lifestyle is more than surface level, which it is, a lot of the initial interaction and attraction you have is just based on a picture.
Right.
I mean, there's no avoiding that. And I definitely don't want to sound shallow by saying that, but when you're scrolling, when you get search results on Cassidy or SLS or any of those, you typically get 15 or 20 pages, 200, 300, 400 results. So you've got to kind of be snap judgment.
Yeah, there's always an initial filtering that goes on, and I think that's common in normal life too. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those profiles where it was just like an initial gut reaction to a picture, that would be just like a quick, hey, we liked your profile. If you guys want to contact us, feel free to message us back here. But if there was something more to the profile, or I had a gut feeling that there was something more to this couple, then read through the profile and do a more detailed, personal message.
Sure. So you said something a second ago about your re-entry into the lifestyle. I was wondering if we could maybe elaborate on that a little bit and then talk about, what got you guys interested in this to begin with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll do the brief synopsis and he'll pop in with details.
Yeah, give the high level version, and we'll send people to you guys for if they want to dive in real deep and hear all the gory details.
Absolutely. Well, so we dated through high school. We met when we were I was 15 and he was 16. And so we didn't break up at all through that time. So we dated through high school and college and then got married immediately after college. Fast forward about 4 years, I would say, after we got married. And we had been, I don't know, we had some friends, not friends that we had lifestyle interest with, but we just vanilla type of friends. And we would always end up talking about sex, like all the time with them. So we were living in a different part of the country at that time, a larger city. And somebody found out that, there's a club in our city here that people have sex there. You can go there and you can meet different people and you can do whatever. And so kind of that sort of opened the can of worms of let's go check that out. And so we ended up checking it out with just some friends that we had no interest in doing anything with them, but it was just kind of like our wing couple. And so we decided to go one night to this club.
Scared out of our minds.
Yeah, you were more scared. I had no idea what to even expect, so I don't think I even knew enough to be scared. It was just kind of like, we're with our friends, and I'm not sure what we're going to see.
I was under the assumption that every guy in the place was going to pounce on Eve as soon as we walked in the door, because that's what a sex club was to me.
Sure.
Or the lifestyle or anything else was wife trading was what it was. So
but if you've never been, how would you know, right?
Right.
Didn't have a clue.
And so this was mid-20s roughly for you guys?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was a couple years after we got married.
Yeah. And so when we were there, we actually ran into a former coworker of mine and his wife. And that is actually...
And the couple that they were paired with at the time.
Go ahead and tell that part because...
Well, yeah, we ran into your former coworker and his wife, and then the couple that they were kind of in their mutual swapping relationship or whatever you'd call it at the time, their lifestyle relationship. And the guy that was Eve's former coworker was one of those smarmy types. Like, he looked at women in the way that, like, the wolf character in a cartoon when you were a kid would look at something and, like, turn him into a drumstick or a T-bone steak. It was that kind of thing. He always had that look on his face whenever he looked at any woman, but especially Eve. And that just bugged me right from the start. I didn't like the guy from the moment I first met him. But his wife showed interest in me from the point we met him at the club and later on hanging out with them a couple times. So they kind of replaced the couple they were with when we first met them at the club with us because we were, younger, newer couple. We were like 10 years younger than them, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in their mid-30s and we were in our mid-20s. So they were like, ooh, young couple. Let's be all over them.
Right.
Yeah.
So because the other female showed interest in me, I could kind of look the other way with my feelings towards the other guy. Keep in mind as well, we had no concept of what the lifestyle was, what swinging was, how to interact as a couple with another couple, rules, boundaries, none of that stuff was anywhere on our radar. The only frame of reference we had was normal vanilla dating principles, which for us were on pause since we were 15 and 16 years old. So we were utterly fucking clueless.
Right.
So
your dating game was a little rusty.
Yeah. We were like, oh, no, you're a dork. No, it wasn't really like that. But
I wouldn't say that. I think the part that we really, that we missed there was that we knew about monogamous dating, and so we kind of applied that to the other couple. So there ended up being possessiveness and jealousy almost with how we interacted with them. But then it wasn't, to compound that, it wasn't about their relationship and then our relationship growing as a result of this. It kind of became a kind of a cross section of Adam and the other lady spending a little bit more time and more energy and effort on each other, and then me and the other husband spending a bit more energy on each other. And then we kind of neglected our primary relationships as a result. So we ended up, fast forward a tad bit, we come to start to name this type of relationship that we had with them was as a dysfunctional polyamorous relationship. Because, and we didn't really learn the language for that until this time around. And this time around was lots of books and lots of podcasts and lots of articles and just whatever I could find to learn about just kind of non-traditional relationships. And so I'm like, I came to him one day and I'm like, we were dysfunctional poly.
And we didn't even know.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we describe it now.
Yeah. I kind of refer to it as we were cheating with the other person's knowledge.
Yeah.
Because I put all, like Eve said, I put all my effort into the other lady. She put all her effort into the other guy. And they weren't really in the lifestyle in the sense that we are now either. He was in it to fuck other women, and she was in it after drinking a 12-pack of beer.
Yeah.
They were very dysfunctional as a couple on their own. They tried to project a lot of their relationship problems onto us and tried to drag us down with all their drama, and they wound up getting divorced. Fortunately, we survived and turned Puritan for like 15 years.
So how long were you in a relationship with them?
About a year.
9 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we were the definition of way too much time with a couple was what we did. We would go over to their house on a Friday evening and not come home to our house until Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
Every week.
Nearly every weekend for a year.
Yeah.
So it was that bad.
And it was like we were in so deep we didn't even know. Like,
we got to see behind the curtain way too much.
Very odd.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of snuck up on you, right? And then so it was everything. It was a sexual aspect, a friendship aspect, almost a true relationship aspect. It was full on for.
Yeah, I mean it was because we were getting to the stupid point of like looking for houses and things like that to share. It was silly. It was dumb.
We did, because where we lived there was lots of new construction, but I want to go ahead and go on record and say that it never would have actually happened.
We would have wised up before we would have actually done it.
Yeah, but it was definitely odd. Like we look back on it and we're like, what? So we ended up when we got out of that, we have mentioned we are from the Midwest, and we very quickly after that whole situation ended, found new jobs and new position, closer to home. And almost that was like our deliverance from our like terrible, like sinful ways. Like it was almost like, God saved us from this situation. It will never happen again. And now, we're just going to, just reset back on the straight and narrow kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
And that went on for probably ultimately it was about 15 years up until last spring, I guess, when we kind of got back into the lifestyle. But the progression this time around was kind of a different one, which we allude to, by our name, Spiritual Swingers. The reason that we got back into the lifestyle was actually because I started to really question a lot of things about just what kind of like human do I want to be in the world? What kind of wife, what kind of mom, what kind of business person, any of it. It was all very, when you're in the religious fundamentalism type of background, it's all very performance based, and it's all very much like if you do, A plus B equals C, and don't step off the path, because be very afraid of what will happen if you don't do exactly what the formula says.
Yep.
So that got to be very oppressive to me. And I was just like, I don't think I can, my self-worth was wrapped up in all the things that I thought I was trying to do so right, and whether that was at work or whether that was, in my spiritual life or religion or any of it. So I kind of, and also around that time that was when I started running, and I found out that I really like listening to podcasts when I run. And so the first ones that I would listen to would be really spirituality based ones, lots of relationship advice ones. I was a young mom of young children at that time. And so it was a lot of things about just family life. And then it kind of grew though into different kind of religious, but different like world religion types of things and different thoughts, new thoughts, and also psychological things. And I got to be very interested in how modern psychology, a lot of it will confirm things that ancient spirituality traditions kind of knew back, for however long. Right. And so that was always very interesting to me. And then it really got more into my own like body image. It kind of got personal, like, oh, I'm the mother of a daughter who's probably going to start asking me some questions about her body at some point. And I was so like uncomfortable by that. I didn't know what to say. I thought, oh my gosh, what if she asks me, something, where do babies come from, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I've got to figure out how to get comfortable with myself before any of that happens. So that was kind of where I would say the sexuality component came into play. Yeah. And I think one of the first things that happened to me was I got out of the shower one day and I just caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And I was like, I haven't seen myself naked in a really long time. I would just get dressed really quick and go to work or do go take care of something for a kid or whatever. And I was like, it's like looking at a stranger almost, like I didn't really know. So it was one of those where I'm like, okay, well, I just decided that I was going to be naked as much as I could and just, by myself, try to get comfortable with, whatever is me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of how it started. And I would say that was about, a year. Was it a year before we got really into
a year and a half before we really got into any lifestyle stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of lost track of the years.
Sexual exploration for us just as a couple.
Right. So it kind of became getting a little more comfortable with, as I got more comfortable with myself, we started having more conversations about things that we might be interested in. And, it kind of grew from there.
Yeah. We did one of those, I don't know if you guys have seen it, one of those yes, no, maybe lists. Mm-hmm. Right. It's got lists of different sexual fantasies and positions and activities and things like that. You mark, yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not. Or maybe if the other person is. So we took one of those and discovered a few new things about ourselves, which led to a sexual awakening for us just as a couple. Mm-hmm. And then, as fantasies grow, you start talking about, well, what if an additional person was involved with us?
Who mentioned that?
That was me. Hey, Adam, that was my that was my pretend. That was my dream. You see the air quotes I'm making? I had a dream one night.
Yeah.
So when that conversation came back up, was it a little bit of like still a sore spot? Thinking back to what had happened, a decade before?
I think Eve was very concerned that I was going to freak out that she was listening to lifestyle podcasts, because she kind of morphed into those from sexuality and sex positive podcasts, and that merged into lifestyle podcasts. And I knew the way when you explained it to me that you were only really listening to them for the stories.
Yeah. There was a lot. I was very interested, and I still am. I'm very interested in non-traditional relationships. So I love to hear about people that are in like polyamory, different arrangements there. I'm very interested in knowing about how, different, the kink community and how they interact and what different things people are into that I have like no idea about. And I would say that those two that I just mentioned, those are not my particular interest, but I'm so interested in how people are wired in different ways.
Yeah,
and
it's
how I
fascinating.
think And I think some people probably are wired for monogamy, and that's cool for them too. And some people aren't really interested in sex at all, and that's cool for them too. I'm just really interested in how different people can become the truest version of themselves, and how their relationship style, how they can express themselves through that. So, but I would say that the lifestyle podcasts and the ones that do talk about, I won't say traditional swinger, I guess I'll just say lifestyle podcasts, as we know the lifestyle, always was a little interesting to me, but I didn't ever think we'd get back into it. That really wasn't why I was listening to it.
No, yeah. I think you explained it to me that you were listening to it for the stories, because a lot of your reaction to the podcast you were listening to was like, oh, I see what's coming here.
Because there's a special mix that I really like in podcasts, and it's when you get some good information that's actually, pretty relevant, pretty, solid information, but then the people that are delivering the information will actually tell about their personal experience as well. So I don't like the really sterile ones where they just talk about like what you should do, like they're the expert, but then they never actually say what they do. I like it when they kind of go, oh, and our experience has been this, or this is what we're going through right now. And I came across a podcast that has been retired for a very long time, but it's called Sex is Fun. Yep. And it ran for a really long time. I mean, from 2006 maybe to 2013. So it was a really long running podcast. So there were tons of episodes to go back and listen to. Yeah. And that group really kind of hooked me, because that's exactly what they did, is they had a topic for every episode, and it was educational, but yet they wanted to share kind of what their experience had been to. Yeah. And one of the, I'll call it a character, I don't know if he was a character or not, but one of the main players on that podcast really opened up at one point about they had gone to Desire, and him and his wife, it seemed like they were kind of like soft swappers up until that point, and then they went to Desire, and it opened up this whole new world to them, and then emotions got involved and feelings got involved, and I was like, oh,
with the couple that
honey,
full swap
I
the first time.
I can see exactly, because with all the things that I had heard about, in all of the other podcasts that I listened to before, there's bonding hormones that happen when you full swap, and so I was kind of like, oh my gosh, is that why, they got so hooked, was because, they made that connection. And I just had all these questions, and I was just so interested in how it was going to play out. Right. And so that was the episode the group of episodes that I had him listen to, because I'm like, oh my gosh, listen to this. You can tell what's going to happen.
That got me hooked on it too, and made me realize that the lifestyle and swinging is not what we were doing 15 years ago. Yeah. That there's 1,000 different levels to it, between just having sex in the same room near another couple to full swap and polyamory and everything on the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. And there's 1,000 levels in between. And also it made me realize that guys that are in the lifestyle are not smarmy, creepy weirdos like the guy in the couple 15 years before. So listening to that Sex is Fun podcast and being able to relate to the guy and his wife and the jealousy issues that he was having when their full swap kind of went awry and the feelings that came up, I identified with that, and I felt the lifestyle was, there was much more of a spectrum to it, and what we had 15 years before was not that. So I'm like, well, we know what not to do. So there's still an interest in this. So let's maybe try it again and do the exact opposite of what we did 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that resource up, because that's Kidder Caper is the guy who hosted that, and his wife is Jade. And it's a fantastic podcast, and we'll put links to that in our show notes and everything, because we couldn't recommend that resource enough to people.
No, we also found it a few years ago and listened to a ton of the episodes.
So,
there were so many of the episodes when I was listening to it that I was like, oh my God, I know exactly what's coming. I know what you guys are doing. You're going down the wrong path. Don't do it.
But I think it speaks to people kind of have to have one experience where they either it kind of sets the baseline. You kind of need a baseline for how to proceed. Right. And some people, it's not that traumatic and they're like, oh, okay, let's figure this out. Or all kinds of emotions get involved, and, they had so many things. Some kind of similar to us. I mean, not in the same way, but just I could tell the emotional aspect of it was really something that.
Oh yeah, like your guys' story, you had kind of a fumble fuck of a first time. Too.
Yeah, we did.
You know, first time, a third time, the seventh time.
No, the first time was the worst.
Yeah. It's just
everybody kind of has that, so it's just. It's good, like you, especially what you guys are doing, where you're getting people's origin stories out there. So there's bound to be somebody that's going to say, "Oh, holy shit, we had that same thing happen to us, and we never went back to the lifestyle because of it." But this couple that we're hearing is in it, and they're doing it right. So maybe we're going to try again, and we'll try to do it right this time. So
and you don't have to be defined by.
Yeah, you don't have to be defined by your mistakes.
In life, really. But I mean, this is a prime example of if you need to practice that, this is great for it because nobody's defined by what happens to them on an experience. They learn from it, and either you like it or you don't.
Exactly.
And if you don't have to do it again.
Exactly.
No, absolutely.
It doesn't scar you. You're not tainted. It isn't anything.
So
to be ashamed of.
So after the questionnaire. The quiz you guys did, it sounds like on Adam's side you said you brought up like a dream or a fantasy that you had about introducing other people, and running parallel to that, Eve was listening to podcasts about the same type of thing, and you guys almost were running down the same path without knowing it. How did
I think I pushed you down the path.
Yeah, you were definitely leading me on the path up until the point where I set up an account for us on SLS.
Yeah.
I took the ball and ran with it.
I kind of had all the resources.
I've been running ever since.
Yeah, I kind of had all the resources with the Yes, No, Maybe list and all the different websites and different things that we had to come across. And I don't know, some of it I didn't think you'd be interested in at all. But like some of the things I would just selectively share with you and say, hey, I listened to this today, or like Dan Savage. We love Dan Savage. That might be where the Yes, No, Maybe list came from at some point or talked about it. But yeah, there's a lot of those things out there that are really interested. Reed Mihalko has a really good website too.
Yep. Talk about sex or read about sex.
Read about sex with our EID. And that was one of them that I thought was really beneficial to us because he has what he calls the slut protocols about how not to get emotionally attached to people that you play with.
Right.
And I felt like just when I heard that the first time, I'm like, that's probably something just as you enter in, because that was kind of what happened to us is we got emotionally swirled together.
We broke every one of those protocols.
Without even realizing it. And that's the thing, without even realizing it. Yeah. So that was another one. And so we kind of, But that was the whole thing is I thought I was just showing him stuff that I thought was interesting.
Right.
I found out one night that we had an account on SLS.
Yeah, well, it was a little bit more involved than that. I mean, the fantasy that I brought up was just, it was kind of a natural progression for where we were going with our sex life. And it was probably a year into our kind of sexual exploration as a couple. Mm-hmm. I think we had more sex in that year than we did in the first 15 years of our marriage.
Yep.
But basically, I had kind of brought up that fantasy, and then it was, a pillow talk kind of discussion from that point on until we went on a vacation, just the two of us, to the Gatlinburg area. We got like a nice secluded cabin out in the woods because Eve always talks all the time about, being outside in nature, able to be naked and have sex out in nature. It was a big thing.
I can relate to that. It's amazing.
So much fun.
Oh,
it's so much fun. And there's so few opportunities to do it feels like. So.
Oh, I know. So we got this nice secluded cabin in the mountains that didn't really have any neighbors around. So we were like out on the patio in the hot tub naked all the time. Mm-hmm. And we started having more discussions, listening to podcasts and talking more about that fantasy of adding an extra person, adding a female, which, bisexual females is the gateway drug of the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. So Eve, do you identify as bisexual?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely fun. I've always been attracted to women. It's not my main event or anything, but at that point, that was kind of a first step. And I'm like, well, hey, yeah, let's check that out. So,
yeah. Yep. So we got to discussing hiring a professional. And
because of all of the boundary stuff that we were kind of afraid of. We knew we got it way too deep the first time. And so we're like, well, maybe if we just hired somebody, then we wouldn't, they just kind of evaporate after it's over. And you don't really
what
have
is
to
the
worry.
Dan Savage thing? If you want
you're not paying them,
results, hire a professional.
Yeah, well, his other quote on that is, you're not paying them for the sex, you're paying them to go away afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was kind of our mentality with it. So, but the more we discussed, the more we got to the point where we're like, we're not sure we really want that. We don't need to go down that path. So we started investigating lifestyle sites. So I thought I would look for like discussion forums or something like that would just talk about it so I could learn a little bit more. And the first result that came up was SLS. And, the only way to see anything on SLS is if you sign up for an account. So I did an account. And I'm looking through at people. I'm like, hey, there's some, attractive, decent sounding, normal people on this site. I was showing it to Eve one day, and she saw our username down at the bottom, but didn't know it was our username. She's like, oh, that's interesting. It's this reference. And I'm like, yeah, that's our account. So we have an account now on a swinger website. So
yeah.
And it all kind of went from there.
Blown away. I was like, really? You're okay. I did not see that one coming at all. But it was fine. I was totally fine with it. So there wasn't.
So when you guys started back into this, did you lay out some rules and some guidelines, doing all the research you had done to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that you had the first time around? Yeah,
we probably had the most boundaries of anyone entering the lifestyle ever.
Sure,
our rules were basically, our boundaries were basically parallel play only, girl-girl contact is all right, but no cross-contact, male to female, no soft swap.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally just girl-girl play and then parallel play after that. And that was what surprised me the most, and probably Eve as well, is that we were able to find as many couples as we did and go out on as many dates and have as many play experiences as we did that first summer with those relatively strict boundaries. I mean, literally every couple we did anything with was at least soft swap, probably full swap couples.
Mm-hmm.
At
I think
the time
they had
that
all
we
done more.
Met them and went out to dinner and played with them. Yet they were still willing to work within our boundaries, which was, I mean, not only an ego boost that people were interested in us, but it was it calmed my nerves big time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must have been reassuring to know that people in this community can respect the boundaries that you guys lay out ahead of time.
Absolutely. And that was huge for me because I still was carrying a whole lot of baggage from our thing 15 years ago. Because when we did that, we always played separate room because I could not stand to see Eve with the other guy. That it drove me crazy. So for me to be able to have these experiences now with respectable guys, respectable couples that were willing to work within our boundaries and still have a sexy, fun time, that was huge for me. That was a really big deal with building my confidence and being okay with all this again.
Yeah. So you guys said you started... you dated, or you looked online for a bunch of people, met some people in your area, but then you mentioned you went to Desire. How did that conversation come up, and how did you decide to go there?
Well,
that was really kind of a fear of missing out thing. Is really the reason why we went.
Yeah, but like, I mean, if we think about this, we started the this whole thing. It was probably like May of last year. And up until that point, we had gone nowhere. Like, we had not been naked anywhere with anyone else ever, except for whatever dates we had been on. But we kind of started to look at I felt like we started looking at some different vacation spots on our own. And it seemed that everybody that we met on the websites had been to Desire.
Well, they constantly talked about it on Sex is Fun, too.
Yeah,
that was their go-to lifestyle destination.
But about that time, I would say that's when we discovered we got a thing with Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And so I kind of started going through all of those episodes. It was probably the middle of the summer last year, maybe around like June or July. And I came across, like, I guess the episode from when they announced their Desire trip that was going to be happening in November of 2017. So this was still months ahead. I think they said they planned it for 14 months. So they had announced that they were going with Swinging Down Under and The Curious Couple in November of 2017. And so this is like June or July of, that same year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it hasn't even happened yet. Oh, so in my mind, I'm like, darn it, we're so like, we could still go, but.
And I looked right away in that point and it was sold out already. Because I looked over the summer and there was nothing available. So I'm like, well, we missed out. We didn't get on early enough.
Yeah. So
I would check back occasionally, like once a month or something through the rest of the summer and the early fall to see if there was anything available.
But we weren't that motivated to go yet, except for
it was totally a random
Then
check.
We started to meet different people on Cassidy and different, I think it was mostly Cassidy, that were going to be going on that very trip. And so we're like, oh my gosh, they're talking about going on this trip with all the podcasters, of course, that we're obsessed with. And oh my goodness, it's Mr. and Mrs. Jones and C&D and TNA and, all of them. And, and then so the fear of missing out completely kind of like overtook us. And until about a week or so before, maybe 2 weeks before Halloween.
Yeah, I continued to randomly check throughout the summer and early fall, and it kept showing sold out. And for whatever reason, like 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks before, so like around Halloween, I happened to get on the Desire site on my phone instead of my iPad. And the weird way that you book through Desire, I think it takes you to a different site, or it used to when you go on your phone versus your iPad. So it showed there was rooms available for that week. I'm like, okay, let's test this. So I get all the way to the point of putting in a credit card number, and I'm like, holy shit, this is real. We're gonna be able to go. Yeah. And it was a super discounted price too. So I showed it to Eve, and I'm like, you don't want to know how much this costs. And she's like, tell me. And I told her, and she's like, oh, we're going. We are absolutely going.
By this point, we were going.
Yeah. So I went through and paid for it and everything, and it wound up that we were able to go with 2.5 weeks ahead of when the actual trip was. We totally fell into it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
So
somebody's going to hear this and be like, I was on the waiting list and we didn't get to go. And
those bastards made it 2 weeks ahead, and I sat on the waiting list for 9 months.
Technology, guys. Sorry. Yeah. We know about technology, right? And how it works and doesn't always. But it worked out to our advantage that time.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned early on was in the hot tub with the Joneses that Mr. Jones had his arm around Eve. By this point, had you guys scaled back?
We loosened our boundaries.
You loosened the boundaries a little bit?
Yeah, we had by the time we went to Desire, we had soft swapped a couple times with a couple that we had seen 3 or 4 times, and we had discussed before we went to Desire like what our boundaries were going to be when we went, and we decided that if we were to play with anybody at Desire, just because it was such a once in a lifetime thing, that we would be okay with soft swap from, first date, so to speak. Because that was typically not our thing up to that point. It was, on a first interaction, we were still always like girl parallel play, maybe some cross contact, but no soft swap on a first play time. And, we kind of loosened those boundaries a bit when we went to Desire, just because it was, once in a lifetime vacation, which is now going to be first of many in a lifetime vacation.
Yeah, because once you go, you guys know, I'm sure.
Yeah,
it's a drug. You can't stop.
You're addicted.
Yep. We're well aware. So since then, have things evolved down that path further, or have you guys pretty much stayed with the soft swap structure for now?
Well, I'd say that we try to treat each couple, each interaction as their own, as it's its own thing, because we do have an episode somewhere along there where we talked about how, we started to be able to do more with people, and Adam says, I think I'd have been more I think I'd have been comfortable with us doing more, on the last interaction. So we kind of projected that into the next interaction, and that didn't always go great. So, we I think it just depends on what the scenario is, and you kind of just have to take each one as they come. But yeah, I mean, we're still soft swap though, I would say.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, we've had this discussion a lot of times that because of the four-way connection that's necessary with a couple, I think we're always going to default in the foreseeable future to maximum of soft swap on a first playtime, because you just don't want to overcommit, because we like to go with like what Mrs. Jones says, that you'd rather regret not doing something with the option to do more than to regret what you just did.
Yeah. So
we don't want to go into it with a couple and say, yeah, we're full swap, and then have it be some weird, awkward, horrible interaction. And then, what are you left with at that point? You're just left with bad memories. So,
right. Well, and sometimes you don't know the full, you don't realize your sexual connection with someone until you play with them a little bit and kiss and stuff. And then you're like, oh, this is you have really good chemistry with that person. But you don't know that necessarily from just talking to somebody. Sometimes you do, but.
Exactly. Yeah. We want to see how the other couple interacts with each other before we commit to interacting too much with them individually.
Yeah.
So, but the footnote to that is we have had full experiences with singles, a single male and a single female on separate occasions. Mm-hmm. And Eve has had the opportunity to full swap with the single male and myself with the single female. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my idea, because I would like to at some point be comfortable with full swapping with a couple again. I don't know that I'm there yet, but part of the process for me was to be able to see Eve with another guy. And I felt that to do that with a couple, for me to be fully engaged with Eve experiencing that, and for me to be able to fully experience it too, I would have to kind of ignore the female of the couple if we were to do that with a couple. And I don't want to do that, because I know the first thing a female would think is that, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting attention, or not getting attention, but is there something wrong with me that he's not paying full attention to me?
Yeah.
And I don't want to put a female of a couple in that position. That's an uncomfortable position. So in my mind, it was logical to find a single male. That way I could be fully engaged and fully connected to Eve's experience.
Without neglecting somebody else.
Yeah, without neglecting someone else, and to be able to get comfortable with it. And vice versa.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome way to go about it. And it's something that I don't know that we've ever heard somebody have that exact strategy. But when you think about it, because you hear we soft swap, then we full swap, and then, that's the natural progression. But to say, well, we're going to soft swap, and then I fully want to take in seeing Eve with another guy, and then Eve fully wants to take in seeing you with another woman.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the pressure off that I think people feel in those situations where it's like, okay, well, they started soft swap, and tonight was the night we're going to full swap, and nope, they've started to move on to it. So now I got to hurry up and get ready to go, but now I'm not. It's not working. So many things that happen in that moment, and it's just it's a huge mind game that you're struggling with. So I think that's a really fascinating way to approach it. So
it seems obvious. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, it seems like we've heard so many stories about, women performance issues are not as visible as a guy,
and don't exist.
They're easily remedied with some lube and,
and the right attitude. Right. And so guys they don't have that luxury. And so I think it's really helped, because that hasn't been an issue for you ever any of the times.
No.
And it's been, I think, a nice confidence builder for you. And I think that's part of it too, is because I think every guy probably kind of wonders, of course, you can fantasize about it and say, oh yes, whenever the time is right to full swap, I'll just be ready to go.
Yeah,
and then everybody knows that maybe, but maybe not. And you just,
there's a few out there that might be. But.
That's the wild card. And so, it kind of does help to not have so much going on when you try that maneuver the first time, because it might go great or it might be harder than anticipated. And so it's nice to have it kind of in a somewhat controlled environment.
I just want to be able to let go enough in the experience of full swap with a couple that I don't have to be concerned about what's going on next to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
That I can just be comfortable with the fact that she's having fun and I don't have to be fully engaged with it to be okay with it.
Yep.
And I'm not quite to that point yet, but I know it's possible. Is the best way to put it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a very good point. Is I think you talk to a lot of couples who that's a huge concern. Is there, and I speaking 100% for myself on this. I'm constantly worried about what's happening, and that's even true with people that we've known for a while. Is like, is she having fun? What's going on? And every time you start doing that, you stop paying enough attention to what you're doing, and then that suffers, and you feel bad for the woman that you're with, and exactly what you said. So it's a tricky thing to do.
And then, God forbid, if you finish first or the other guy finishes first, then what do? Either you're sitting there and watching, or you're like, oh shit, now everybody's watching me, and I got to hurry, and now I have to finish. Yeah. All kinds of discomfort.
A lot of moving parts.
Very awkward situations sometimes.
Yeah.
But, once you start to get to be friends with people, those things happen, and then people laugh about it, right? Or you just
absolutely.
You figure out the way around it, right? So I think
there's a comfort level that is established over a period of time. So
yeah, it's not to say that it can never happen, because it's happened for us, it's happened for lots of people, but I think the comfort is the huge factor there.
Never say never. That's my philosophy. Right? I can never say never to that.
So have you guys, the second time around, feel that there's some benefits to your relationship that you've started to notice in the last year and a half or so?
Oh, massively.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's communication, which I think, everybody says that, but it's like when there's no topic that's not on the table, once you can talk about all this stuff, then what else is there to be that's too personal, like you can talk about everything. So.
Yeah, we were just kind of talking about that last night, watching Trading Spaces of all boring shows.
Is that even still on?
They brought it back.
They brought it back.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there was some hot carpenter on there, and Eve commented about him. I'm like, well, just so you know, I have a thing for the designer Genevieve too, and I always have. So,
like, okay.
It's like now there's all these things that normally you would just be bottling them away, and pushing them back down into the back of your mind. But now we can just say it. We can talk about it.
And there's absolutely no.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your fears of kind of what happened in your past going into this time have been dissipated over the last year.
Yeah. And a lot of it was just kind of breaking down the jealousy feelings that I've always kind of had. There was this workbook actually that Eve got me about, going through feelings of jealousy and how to break it down and work through it. And it was kind of funny because at the time she got it for me, I had pretty much already worked through all of it in the exact process that it laid out in the book. So I was just kind of going through reading it. I'm like, yeah, done that. Yeah, done that. Yeah, done that. But the basic strategy of it is the first thing you kind of have to discover is that jealousy in and of itself is not an emotion. It's a combination of other emotions, like a fear of inadequacy, a fear in general, a bunch of other different emotions that all kind of get lumped together into this term jealousy. So what you have to do, like if you see your partner kissing another person and you feel quote unquote jealous, what are you actually feeling? Are you feeling fear that the other guy that she's kissing is a better kisser than you? Are you feeling fear that she's going to leave you? Are you feeling inadequate because that other person might be a better kisser than you? Are you feeling disappointed because that other person's partner is not paying as much attention to you? Break down what those feelings are, and then you can identify, well, is that a real fear? Is that a real feeling of inadequacy, or is it imagined?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So do I have a legitimate fear that my spouse is going to leave me for this other person just because she's kissing him?
Right.
No. Do I have a legitimate fear that this other person is a better kisser than me? Well, no, we have all this history together. So, but if my spouse would have a history of going behind my back after kissing other people, then that's a legitimate fear. So, that's part of the process, is to break those feelings down, discover whether it's a legitimate emotion or an imagined emotion. And then you can discuss that with your partner, and you can set your boundaries and everything else based on those feelings that you're having. So say I have this unreasonable fear that the other person's a better kisser than me. Okay, well, let's just say let's not do kissing with somebody new, on a first date, or first 2 dates, or whatever it is, just till we're comfortable enough with that. I know that you're not going to leave me for that other person or whatever else, or that I know enough about them,
right,
to be comfortable with being able to see that.
Sure.
So that was kind of the process I worked through on my own, and this book kind of validated it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And some of that processing, some of that stuff is happening like lightning fast in the middle of a situation too, where you're, everything that you just explained over the last 4 or 5 minutes happens in like a split second.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're like, holy shit, I got to process this really fast. What am I going to do? How am I going to react? Do I need to? Yeah. So it's something that, people think, you're going to get in there and it's just going to be super hot and super awesome. And sometimes it is, but sometimes things come up and you're constantly.
The most random thing can tweak you, and you'll never know what it is until it happens. And then you'll have to process through it afterwards.
But then going back to what you said a minute ago, is that your guys' communication now is so much more wide open that you're not afraid to go to her and say, hey, this is something that happened. It's weird, but it happened, and here's what we need to do about it, or what do you think about it? And
yeah, exactly. There's no more of the, let my imagination get the best of me and let my mind run wild. There still is a little bit of that, obviously, that comes up when your lid initially flips and you get all kinds of unreasonable thoughts in your head, but that you're able to have a real conversation with the other person and put that stuff to rest without letting it get blown out of proportion.
Right.
Have you guys told anybody in your family and friends that, I guess, did the relationship change over the last year?
Yeah, we actually we came out to our former pastor and his wife.
Yeah, we did
a couple months ago. It was hilarious.
Well, and they're close friends of ours, and they're not associated with our church anymore. But it was pretty funny. We hadn't seen them for a few months and happened to get back together with them. And after a few drinks, I just told his wife, we went to a clothing optional resort a few months ago. And she was like, oh. And then thought for a minute, and she goes, oh, were there swingers there? Are you guys swingers? And it was hilarious because Adam and I are looking at each other like, there's kind of the point of no return now.
It's out of the bag now.
We paused for too long. Like there was no, so it was pretty funny. And so that's a funny story that we like to tell people. They're like, what? Your pastor?
But they could not have been cooler about it, though. They were awesome. They, normally people would just go, oh, yeah, okay. And have all these thoughts in their head about what
not say anything else.
Not understanding anything about it. But we sat down with them for a couple hours that night, and
they had so many questions.
They had so many legitimate questions about it. And we just had dinner with them again a couple weeks ago, and another 3-hour conversation of them just asking very intelligent questions, like wanting to know why we do it and what the dynamic is like and what the community is like and what it's all about. And they could not be more supportive and open about it.
Well, I think being in their field, because they both are involved in church culture.
Yeah.
They've seen what happens in people's relationships that don't work and how sexually repressed most of Christianity is. And I think they can tell that, we don't have interest in these folks. They're not our, we weren't trying to flip any vanillas or anything.
Well, and they have no interest in joining the lifestyle either. It's their curiosity.
But I think that's the point, is that they've seen what happens sometimes when people are sexually repressed and all of the baggage that comes along with Christian
and how it can negatively affect the couple, and how they're happy to see a sexually open couple getting
exploring
closer
together.
and exploring together. And they actually commented how they could tell that I'm more of an introverted. Like I would choose not to talk to someone anytime over talking to them in vanilla world, but put me in a lifestyle situation and I will go talk to anybody. I'm one of the most outgoing people in the world, and it's been kind of hard for Eve to deal with.
I can actually relate to that because Finn is pretty introverted, and then we went to Desire this last year, and he was talking to everyone, and I was like, who is this person?
Right? Yeah. It's a little bit jarring. You're kind of like, okay, I'm used to being the one that has to carry the conversation, and then, and so it's like it kind of comes out of left field. You're not really sure what's going to be said next. Right?
Yeah.
And so,
it was fun.
It's been a fun journey. Yeah.
But they had actually commented when we were out to dinner that they had noticed a difference in me and a difference in us, that we seemed closer and that I seemed more happy and outgoing than I normally was. So they knew something was going on, but they just didn't know what at first.
Yeah.
That's really awesome to hear that, somebody from the outside that doesn't know what's happening can tell, hey, you guys, things seem maybe better or improved. And then to find out what it is, and it's like, oh, wow. Wouldn't have thought that, but that's a really,
Would have known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a really cool story.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, when you guys broke up with that couple years ago, how did that end? Did you guys realize that you were in too deep and get out, or did they end it? And you don't have to share it if it's too much, but
no, we can tell their relationship started to crumble like before our very eyes. Like they would fight like almost the whole time that we would be visiting them on the weekends, and it would be, and there was lots of drinking, and it was just kind of dysfunctional, and we just saw it disintegrating in front of us. Oh, wow. So we started to kind of separate ourselves and not be so,
because it was leading to drama between us too, because she would talk to you about her problems and try and project her problems with her husband onto you and us, and try and say that I was doing similar things to him and that you should have just as many problems with me as she has with him, and try and drag us down with their drama. And I think fortunately you realize that that's kind of what was going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It just seemed like it was not, it just, that it's that new relationship energy thing that they talk about.
Oh yeah.
And so that was kind of wearing off, and we were seeing behind the curtain exactly how they were acting. And I think she had moved out at the point that we kind of were like, okay, we're just going to cut ties. And about that time, it was like, we need to find some different, like we were kind of done with that city by that point. It was kind of like, we've got to figure this out. Emotionally, like we just made the separation. Like we're just like not even in this area anymore. And this was back before like Facebook and everything. So like literally I don't even think we told him we were moving. We just left and not looked back.
Yeah, we completely cut ties. It was years later before she reached out to us on Facebook.
She reached back out to us on Facebook. Like 7 or 8 years later. And honestly, she wasn't the problem really. No. I mean, we would have stayed friends, but just that whole, if anybody knows anyone who's been through a divorce, I think it just makes you not yourself for a while. And so she was in a better place by the time we reconnected that way. And we're still Facebook friends. We see what, but it was pretty like we just outdone.
Yeah. No, I was curious. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, luckily you guys didn't have to sell a house with them. That would have been a whole other ball of wax.
Right.
Yeah. That
was like one day we went and looked at houses. I kind of can't believe you said that, because we really loved with them, seriously. But we did go a couple times, because who doesn't walk through model homes from now on?
Right.
Again.
Just for fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the realtor's like, so what's your guy? Are you guys good friends? Like, oh, well, here's what we do. And here's how we do it. So for anybody who's just getting into this, what's some advice that you know now that you wish you had known, on day one when you guys started looking into this?
I would say one of the most important things for me has been to have like a discrete signal to let your partner know that you're tweaked or that something's bothering you or something has struck you in a negative way without having to have like without either having to have like the, that look like, don't you know I'm uncomfortable right now? You need to have like a subtle signal, whatever it is. I think the Joneses talk about they're pulling the hair on the back of his leg or something like that, or Paige and Penn have the 3 squeeze thing or something like that. Just some subtle signal that you can let your partner know, okay, I want to get back and reconnect with you because, something's tweaking me right now. Because if you don't have that, you can't expect your partner to notice that you're uncomfortable. That's impossible. Mm-hmm. It'll never happen. And the more you wait for them to notice and the longer they don't notice, the more your imagination's going to run wild and it's all going to go south faster than you can imagine. So yeah, that would be my number one advice to a new couple is make sure you have that secret signal to give your partner that you want to reconnect.
So I would say along those same lines is I think it's important, especially as a new couple, to remember that there's always going to be another opportunity. So I know sometimes there can be a tendency to want to just jump in. And, I think there's always room to build with people that you are interested in. So there's no need to rush in and just to have an experience. Like, don't have an experience just to have an experience.
Yeah.
Kind of do what is my, I guess I've kind of described the lifestyle interactions as kind of like a prescription medication. It's kind of like you can do enough just to heighten the experience that you and your partner are going to have anyway, but you don't want to do too much or you might end up with a hangover. Or you might end up with whatever you call it, like withdrawals or an overdose. Yeah. So, I think it's the minimum dosage necessary because there's always going to be another opportunity to do a little bit more and to build a little bit more excitement.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to go down a road there about there might be a hangover or something worse, and that worse being maybe like some type of STI or something along those lines.
So that could be too.
It's a possibility too.
I guess since I brought the topic up on purpose, do you guys mind talking about how you guys handle those conversations and how you guys navigate the risk around the potential for that within the community?
So we've gone and been tested before, and I guess we haven't full swabbed except for only a couple of times. So obviously when that happens, it's always condoms. We really haven't talked about.
Yeah, we've never really had the discussion with the actual discussion of, protection versus not or anything like that.
Like because, for oral.
Yeah.
We haven't really
because that's the only thing that would have ever been on the table is oral. Mm-hmm. It's never even been implied that we were going to full swap. So there was never a requirement for a discussion of condoms or anything like that. But
when you guys meet other couples, do you guys discuss like, well, we were tested, 2 months ago and here's what our results were. What is your guys' status? And
I don't think it's ever come up.
We've had people mention in passing that they've just been tested and that they were clear. I think, really it comes down, I guess for us, it's kind of come down to sort of like the visual inspection, when you get to that point, because obviously you're not going to go there if you see anything that indicates something that might be a concern. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. We're not sounding very,
no, it's not. I mean, I
very
think
educated on this, but I think.
But I guess
you get a feel for the people too, and you get a feel for how often they play and how connected to each other they are.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the vetting process during our chatting and stuff like that.
But then also you see how they interact with each other, and everybody that we've been with has been in a really long-term connected type of a relationship with each other, and so you can tell that they care about their health and they care about their partner. And so I guess it's kind of, in talking about the vibe and kind of the feeling that you get from them, but it's, obviously they seem to care about each other, and it isn't just like this guy over here trying to get, something on the side, or the woman, definitely they're in it as a team. And so that comes through.
Yeah. It's like
that makes us feel more comfortable. That makes us feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It was just, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on it. We like to kind of find out how different couples handle that. And I think everybody handles it a little different, and it's sort of, everyone has their own risk tolerance, and that's totally, that's part of what makes you guys you, right? So,
yeah.
Earlier, you guys mentioned a whole bunch of resources, and we're going to, of course, link to all of those. Are there any other resources that you didn't mention that you found useful while you were exploring this?
So one of the first books that I read about all of this was Tristan Taormino's Opening Up. Mm-hmm. And that's a really good resource, I think, because it talks about a lot of different relationship arrangements, I guess. And I thought that was really interesting.
Cassidy is a good one. I mean, that to me is the best looking site out there. But as we kind of discussed, I think before we started this podcast, was that their community is not quite as large as some of the other sites that have been out there a lot longer.
Sure. At least in this area, in the Midwest.
Yeah, in the Midwest.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah. The user interface to me is definitely the best on Cassidy. The other ones have a lot more people, so you kind of have to deal with the lack of user interface and, neat stuff going on with the site for the fact that there's more people on it. So, but basically, kind of like I said at the beginning, you just got to put yourself out there.
Yep.
You just got to not wait around for everybody to contact you.
Right.
And yeah.
Cool.
Well, we'll dig all those up and make sure there's links for them all so people can find them. And we wanted to say thank you guys for taking the time to come on the show and talk with us. And before we go, do you want to tell people where they can find you guys?
Yeah, we are at spiritualswingers.net is our website. And we're also on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all your standard podcast resources. Just search for Spiritual Swingers and you'll find us. Twitter, we're at Spiritual Swing. That's Great. Where we waste a lot of our time is on Twitter. Mostly me, but Eve chimes in on there once in a while too. Anything that's like a valid resource with a lot of educational aspects to it was probably tweeted by Eve. If it's like boob pictures or something,
I was going to say, it's just a bunch of dick pics. It's just Adam.
Yeah, it's just me.
Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for spending your evening chatting with us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and
thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having.
Absolutely, anytime. So we will be in touch and we'll talk soon.
Awesome.
All right, sounds good.
Bye guys.
It's us again. Thanks again to Spiritual Swingers for coming on the show. We had a blast talking with them. And next week we have a interview with our first solo poly male person.
Our first solo anything person.
Yeah.
So we're super excited for that. And in the meantime, if you feel like giving us any feedback, if you're still listening, we appreciate it.
Yeah, if you made it this far, thank you.
And we will see everybody in 1 week.